You all are fine. So as you've seen in the thumbnail, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto and Gaia were couples? Now let's move on to the special movie. Baldur? Are you awake? Still not used to hearing that name. You'd think a man would have gotten over it by now being reborn as a god. But no, some things never quite change from your first go around. Even after nearly 7 years of hearing all of Asgard call him by his second name, there was still the faint pause, a brief flicker of confusion he hadn't quite mastered. HRMPH. Thoughts for later. It was warm, he was tired, and someone was trying to wake him from a very pleasant dream. A rather heady dream involving a certain trio of Valkyries and a rather pleasant evening he was looking forward to. Result. Ignore the meddler, roll over, and pretend he hadn't heard her. Nope. Not awake at all. A hand nudged his shoulder. Son, I need you to wake up. He batted at her hand. Go away, mother. M'sleeping over here. He felt 2 firm fingers pinch his nose. Blue eyes snapped open, squinted against the sun. A familiar face stared back. He sat up and managed a sleepy yawn. Hey, Mum. Felt weird calling someone that at first, but he'd grown used to it over time. Kushina she most assuredly was not, but Freya was still a damn good parent. 1 out of 2 wasn't so bad. Is that all you have to say? She ran a hand through his blonde hair. You know you can't sleep out here. You're worrying me. Blearily, he realized where he was. He'd fallen asleep on a bench while sunning himself in the training grounds again. Not uncommon in Asgard. The realm was a lovely place, really couldn't claim otherwise despite all he'd seen, but there was just something about it that felt lacking at times. Maybe it was the air, or the airs Odin put on. No, don't think of the old man. He'd ruin his mood. Kurama scoffed. Even if you want to kill him. He scoffed a little. Even then, it wasn't anything personal, really. He simply didn't trust the man he called father in this life. The Allfather was well-spoken and clever, his capriciousness second to none. His schemes made Orochimaru look like some juvenile bully. Never enough to draw his eye, never enough to truly rouse the realms against him, but his deeds remained and his crimes were more numerous than the stars themselves. They might ever admit it to his face, but the Aesir feared their leader. Whispered he had gone mad. The answer was simple. One of these days, Odin would have to die. Simple as. He'd have to warn Mimir beforehand. Wouldn't do to have him be trapped in a tree or something. Shouldn't be too hard to get Thor and Sif on board. He'd already made inroads there with their kids. Adorable little buggers. And from there, who knew? He'd not aired his plans to anyone else and he intended to keep it that way for as long as he could. Odin was a clever bastard, but he'd dealt with schemers before. In the long run, he felt he had the measure of his so-called father. And once he fell, it would be time for a... Why don't you go train with the Valkyries? Freya gave him a nudge, breaking him out his reverie. GNA was asking after you again, to say nothing of Ire and Hildur or Mist and Wrist. They would, wouldn't they? A blonde brow rose. No Sigrun this time? She coughed. I believe Mimir has her. Occupied. Ah, working on a son, were they? Good for them. They deserved some happiness. Another yawn had him reeling. Gods, he really was tired. Freya Mom touched a hand to his shoulder. He honestly just wanted to sleep. But Freya worried. She thought something was wrong with him, that he slept too much these days, and maybe he did. Should we exert ourselves this time? Fiend. He slapped a hand against his tattooed chest with a sigh. I suppose I'll see what they want. Probably to get knocked around the yard some more. If he was honest, he enjoyed fighting the Valkyries. Kept him sharp, ya know. Better than deal with Thor, at any rate. At Leah's they were sober most of the time. Easier on the eyes, too, once he got their masks off, among other things. That's my boy. Do be careful. Bot and don't get hurt. Eh. He shrugged and lurched to his feet. No need to worry about that. As though sensing that very thought. Freya's voice echoed after him, taking on a teasing tone. And try not to give me grandchildren yet. Naruto lazily flipped her off over his shoulder and kept walking. It was a good life as the god of peace. He'd fight to keep it that way. A.N. Still in the golden age of Asgard here, before Odin screwed everything up and the world went to OT. Surprised no one took a swing at this. A reincarnated Naruto, reborn as Baldur. God of light? God of peace? Right up his alley, methinks. Surprisingly, Baldur had a son too, for Seti, though he was only mentioned twice by Sif. Do you want this to be a story? Yes. No? Maybe so. Make yourselves heard. Once more, we're sticking with the Embers rule for this particular story, and others. If folks don't like this, it won't be continued. Meaning that if the story itself ain't popular, poof, gone. Completely. I'm working 2 jobs, might need a third soon. so I barely have time to write. As such, I cannot afford to write something folks don't enjoy. So by all means, speak up. Your voice matters. Make yourself heard. As ever, reviews are the fuel that sustain me. Without them I cannot write a single word. Simple as that. Working nearly all hours of the day keep me absurdly busy, and I can't bring myself to write something folks don't like. On there we go. As ever, reviews keep me alive. Without them, I cannot write. So, in the immortal words of Atlas. Review. Would you kindly? And have some previews potential blot bin things that I'm working on. Previews. Oi. I'm rather fond of Brock. Let me put it plainly. Stab that dwarf and I stab you. Everywhere. Wow. 9 Valkyries against little, OL me. I'm honored. His fist crashed out. Hildur rocketed backwards, hit a wall, and went limp. Oops. He lowered his fist. 8 now. You're like me, son. Odin slung an arm around his shoulders. You want answers, don't you, Baldur? With the other, he gestured to the broken crack in the world. That glimmering, shivering sliver of green light hung in the air. You want to know out what it's all about. Naruto heaved a sigh. Answers would nice, yes. But he didn't trust the one-eyed man. Odin only ever asked after him when he needed something. There's someone I'd like you to find for me. Knew it. Right, sick of you Norns already. He hefted his hammer. You believe in fate? Destiny? Think you can predict me? Predict this. Heimdall. Stop being a prick. Now, Baldur. Why would I ever listen to someone like Arg? He stumbled back, gurgling as a fist slammed into his face. My nose, you bastard. You broke my nose. Naruto lowered his fist. Read my mind all you like. You're slower than a cow compared to me. Ah, Thrud. Who's my favorite niece? She laughed and tucked her head into his chest. I'm your only niece, uncle. Still my favorite. And are those my nephews I see skulking in the corner? Modni. Modi. Come give your uncle a hug. I bring gifts. I can't feel any of this, Mom. However, he thrust a finger at her. I can understand why you did it. Fear makes us do terrible things. Everything's fine. I'll be just fine. Now take it away. I can't. Freya winced a little, flinching under the weight of his stare. It doesn't work that way, son. A lie. Fine. Hard way it was. Stop the spell, or I'll stop it myself. Blue eyes smoldered red. Can't I? Put the hammer down, Thor. Do you want me to put the hammer down? It was, in hindsight, a poor choice of words, Naruto found. He rocketed up into the air. Kratos stared. The stranger before him stared back, unafraid of him. I thought you'd be bigger, but you're definitely the one. Are you certain you're a giant? Whatever you seek, I do not have it. Huh. The pale man blinked. Squinted. Frowned. You're telling the truth. Well, he reared back with a shrug. Seems Odin doesn't know shit after all. Sorry for wasting your time. Have a nice day. Wait. A hand clamped down on his shoulder, stopping him short with bone-crushing force. He felt his collarbone click beneath it. You serve Odin? Naruto heaved a rueful sigh and scratched the back of his head. Probably shouldn't have said that, huh? Leave my home. And do not return. All right, I will. He waved hand. But from one god to another, you really oughta do a better job at hiding. Kratos rumbled a warning. Fine, I'm going. Be seeing ya. Naruto remembered the moment like it was yesterday. It began with a deal, you see, as these things often do. He was no stranger to the concept of rebirth. If anything, he'd become intimately aware of the strange cycle of reincarnation. He was living proof of it. Sasuke had been, too, once upon a time. Ashura and Indra, they were. Souls reborn throughout countless lifetimes over and over again, until they reached them. It was a fascinating thing when you looked back at it. What kind of strength did that take? Not only to pass on one's will to future generations, but their ideals. Not that it mattered anymore. Ideals were all well and good, but ideals had gotten them killed. They had died. Both of them. Their final battle in the valley had taken more than their arms, but their lives as well. Awful way to go, you know. Strange as it might sound, he didn't feel any regret over the way he died. Death had a way of clearing a man's mind. Sasuke had already passed on to the great beyond. Good for him. He hoped his old friend found peace from his tortured existence. Even so, he wasn't ready to walk into the light just yet. Neither was Kurama. So when a voice offered them an out, suffice to say they jumped at it. A god of light and peace. Of kindness. Even now he remembered the words he'd said in that moment. Why didn't you say so? Go on, send me right through. Don't mind living a second life with a title like that. Sounds fun. How little he knew. Still, he'd taken the deal, and Kurama with him. Alright. Now he opened his eyes. Let's see what we're working with here. It's a boy. His eyes snapped open. Lady, say what now? Light rushed in and he found himself looking at a beautiful woman's face, her weary eyes framed by dark hair. Poor girl. She looked exhausted and... Oh. Oh. He understood, now. She was holding him. He was being held by this woman, who seemed large, but in reality, he was small. Hello, my sweet boy. She crooned softly, stroking the blonde crown of his hair. Welcome to the world. Realization broke like the dawn. No, this did not just happen. Yup. Had he possessed full control of this tiny new body of his, he would have rolled his eyes. As things stood, he merely huffed. Sneaky old man. When he'd taken the deal, he'd thought he would be reborn instantly near the age he died at the very least, not forced to start all over. Bit of a raw deal this. Speak for yourself. An angry rumble echoed at the forefront of his mind. It's cramped in here. I barely fit. Kurama? He strained to answer back. I'm not imagining you, right? I wish you were. This is torture. I want out. On that they were in agreement. He wasn't used to being so restrained, swaddled up as he was. Yet for all that he didn't feel any weaker. The spark of chakra still lingered within him. That, and something else. Whatever it was, it left his mind sharper than ever. He was aware of every instant, every sensation, of the faces looming over him. Having his memories wiped would have been a colossal disaster. He wouldn't be himself without them. Maybe a restart was just what the doctor ordered after all. Better that than a reset. He's silent. The woman's voice intruded on his thoughts, fraught with worry. Is he all right? Uh-oh. Thoughts for later. Right, should probably make a noise or something. What? It almost came out as a question. Thank goodness. Her face softened. Hello, little Baldur. Baldur. That was his new name. The old voice hadn't mentioned that. Still, the woman seemed so sad. Why? Wasn't childbirth supposed to be a happy thing? Nevertheless, she smiled when a hand ran a hand through the crown of his blonde hair. Will you smile for me? He found himself doing so despite himself. Let me see him. In an instant he found himself spirited away, swept out of her arms and into another's. The sudden motion dizzied him, so much so that it took a moment to orient himself. Aha! There he is. My boy. When he came to, he found himself blinking up at balding, one-eyed man. The latter grinned down at him with manic glee, his dark beard going gray. That one eye of his saw far too much for his liking. Well, he hummed. Here you are. As promised. Aren't you remarkable? Wait a second. Naruto knew that voice, if not necessarily that face. It was the same he'd made the deal with. He scowled at him. Shish. The man's smile softened a little in the face of his anger. Everything will be all right. I promise. We're on the same side. You and you'll be walking and talking in no time. He booped his forehead with one finger, his emotions burning bright even to his sixth sense. We're going to be working very closely together. A sigh echoed behind the two of them. You're acting like he'll respond, Odin. The old man, this Odin, only smiled. Perhaps he will, Freya. Let me see my son. Of course. He hummed and handed him over. Didn't mean to monopolize him. Here you are. Naruto found himself passed around once more, already felt the beginnings of a scowl form on his new face. So, the voice he'd heard belonged to a man named Odin. He had an agenda. Of course. Men like him always did. Time would tell if this bargain came back to bite him. Hopefully not. But if it did. Thor, get over here. Odin's voice distracted him. Come see your little brother. A low rumble reached his ears. Fine. In an instant there was a third face staring down at him. A solid young boy, not quite a man, lumbered over to peer at him. Naruto noted dark eyes and red hair. The beginnings of what would one day be a great bristling beard filled his face. He's tiny. The older boy grunted. Gonna be a runt. Naruto slapped a tiny fist against his nose. Thor recoiled, terribly startled. Hey. Freya smiled. Well, we know what he thinks of you. Now hush. I need to feed him. She pulled him close. It was then that Naruto realized something else. No one could understand him yet, or his protests. This time, his cry was far from feigned, 0.0.0.0. Are you prepared, Lord Baldur? A low voice brought Naruto back to himself, hauling him out of the daydream. He blinked, crackled his knuckles, squinted against the sunlight, remembered where he was, what he promised, and just what he was meant to be doing. Right. He'd spaced out again, hadn't he? 10 winged women stood arrayed before him, warriors all. He wished they wouldn't wear their helmets. They really did look quite lovely without them. But that was neither here nor there. No, today was a day for teaching. Wow. He couldn't help but smile as he stroked his blonde beard. 10 Valkyries against little, OL me. I'm honored. GNA pressed a fist to her bosom and bowed her masked head. It is you who honor us today, my lord. None of that. Honor's all well good, but honor won't help the 10 of ya win a fight against me. His fist crashed out as he spoke. Hildur rocketed backwards, hit a wall, and went limp. Oops. He lowered his fist with a mad grin. 9, now. An anxious murmur went up from the rest. No, that wouldn't do. Not at all. He lunged to meet them head-on. Let the lesson begin. What followed wasn't as much a lesson as a mad brawl, full of wild wings, brutal blades and flying fists. Ire, ever the gentle sort, bowed out first when he knocked the wind out of her. The sister's wrist and mist went next, flung out the ring, followed by Gunnar, whom he sent sprawling with a single swipe. GNA gladly traded blows with him for a solid 3 seconds before he drove a knee into her gut, got a hold of her shoulders, and sent her spinning to the dirt. In less than a minute, their number was cut into 5. Less now, when Rhoda made the mistake of flanking him with Olrun, only to recoil as he grabbed them both and bashed their heads together. Their helms rang out with a sonorous crash. They slumped face-first into the dirt, leaving but 3 of their number remaining. Kara smashed a fist into his face, the first to land a blow. He took it out of sheer curiosity, rode with, swept her legs, and kicked her into Geardriffle. Only Gondel remained. He ducked her weapon, blocked a shot at his gut, and swept around her. His hands closed around her wings and tugged in warning. Yield. She yelped. I yield. Great. He let her go, planted a palm against her back, and nudged her toward her sisters. That was great. You all endured a full 3 seconds longer than last week. That's an improvement. Now, go walk it off. GNA, I want a word with you tonight about your footwork. His mother's handmaiden tugged off her mask, took a step forward, nodded. He didn't miss the way her bright eyes flashed. In your chambers, my lord? But of course. The sound of clapping hands ruined the moment and left him contemplating deicide. Magnificent as ever, Baldur. GNA bridled. Without her helm, her expressions were painfully honest. I'll kill him. Just say the word. Naruto rolled his eyes. Don't tempt me. Even without turning, he knew who he'd find sauntering their way. The hearty crunch of someone biting into an apple only confirmed his irritation. He knew of only one god who delighted in eating those awful things. Still, it would behoove him to at least act polite. For now. Nothing to say. The words riled him to no end. I thought a brute like you could do more than grunt. Or are you too by with your horse? Every Valkyrie within earshot stiffened as one. Heimdall didn't seem to care. Now, no need to be cross. You all know it's the truth, don't you? Naruto's tongue betrayed him. Heimdall, stop being a prick. Aha. He speaks. If there was one god he couldn't tolerate, it was this one. He rather enjoyed working with Tyr and Thor at times, but the Watchman of the Aesir aggravated him to no end. He'd chosen a particularly poor time today, seeing as his blood was still up and the Valkyries were still very much nearby. Punch him. Kurama growled in his ear. Punch him hard. He blew out a sigh. This is your one chance to leave, Heimdall. Now, Baldur. Why would I ever listen to a faker like Arg? His would-be tormentor stumbled back, gurgling as a fist slammed into his face. My nose. He touched a hand to the bent, swollen orifice now occupying most of his face. You bastard. Words slurred out of him, muffled by the injury as he glared at him. You broke my dose. Naruto was tempted to break more than that. Because you see, Heimdall read people. Their intentions. Likewise, he read him. He knew what he was, where he'd come from, what he intended to do to this realm. He wasn't sure when only that he had. He'd been quite vocal in his attempts to antagonize him since. Unfortunately for Heimdall, no one liked him. Ergo, no one believed him. Such was the case now as the Valkyries laughed at his plight. Naruto lowered his fist. Read my mind all you like. You're still slower than a cow compared to me. Heimdall seethed, glaring at him between his fingers. Luck. That's all this is. Blind Lou. A fist found his face again with an audible smack. He cried out anew. Bathtard. He slurred. I bat ma ton da time. Did he mean bite his tongue? Yep. GNA turned her head, eyes alight, and hid a muffled snort behind her dominant hand. Luck, eh? Naruto had no need to shelter any such of his smile. What do you call the second time then? Heimdall snarled and spat at him. Wait until I tell the Allfather. Son or not, Odin will be sure to punish you for this. He was still snarling when a third punch caught his chin and sent him flying into the distant wall of Asgard. He struck it with an audible crack. Were one to possess superior vision, which every Go and Valkyrie certainly did, they would have seen the stunned Aesir god tumble all the way down to the ground. More than let out a ragged cheer at the sight of Heimdall's humbling. Gna sighed and ran a hand through her dark hair. You do realize that won't kill him. He's going to be absolutely insufferable now. Naruto rolled a bare shoulder. Not my problem. Shall we go? She looped her arm in his, as my lord commands. Blood upon the snow. A.N. Catharsis. To be clear, Naruto's appearance is essentially overriding Baldur's here. Had a lot of complaints, concerns about that. Still in the golden age of Asgard here, before Odin screwed everything up and the world went to OT. Surprised no one took a swing at this. A reincarnated Naruto, reborn as Baldur. God of light? God of peace? Right up his alley, methinks. Surprisingly, Baldur had a son too, Forseti, though he was only mentioned twice by Sif. Do you want this to remain a story? Yes. No? Maybe so? Make yourselves heard. Once more, we're sticking with the Embers rule for this particular story and others. If folks don't like this, it won't be continued. Meaning that if the story itself ain't popular, poof, gone. Completely. I'm working 2 jobs, might need a third soon. So I barely have time to write. As such, I cannot afford to write something folks don't enjoy. So by all means, speak up. Your voice matters. Make yourself heard. As ever, reviews are the fuel that sustain me. Without them I cannot write a single word. Simple as that. Working nearly all hours of the day keep me absurdly busy, and I can't bring myself to write something folks don't like. On there we go. As ever, reviews keep me alive. Without them, I cannot write. So, in the immortal words of Atlas. Review. Would you kindly? And have some previews, potential blot bin things that I'm working on. Previews. He broke my nose. A. Odin shrugged. You're alive, aren't you? Walk if off. Allfather. For the love of. Look, if Baldur wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Like all those other guys. He waved a hand at him, not looking up from his desk. Now get out of here. I have work to do. Why do you keep punching me? Dunno. Why do you keep being a prick? I am not AAAAAR. Stop smacking me already. Wrist. Missed. Come here. The twin Valkyries obeyed. So you're that Aesir god what been running around the realms, eh? He laughed. You must be Brock, and I take it you're Sindri. At your service. All right, I'll bite. What can you make for me? Sindri balked a little. Well, that depends on you. What do you want? Naruto smiled. Aha. There's my darling niece. I come bearing gifts. Freya opened her hands. Do you trust me, son? Thor raised his tankard of mead and drank deeply. Thinking too much again, little brother. Naruto slammed a hand down on it. And you not enough. You said you'd stop this. Sparking blue eyes met his. I did stop. Now I'm starting again. Sif's fault. You two had another argument again. Thor kept drinking. He swatted the mug out his hand. It flew across the mead hall. The Einherjar fell silent. Thor growled. Listen, you. No. He grabbed him by the beard. You listen to me. Look, I get it. You screwed up. But you can be better than this. You have to be. Think about little Thrud. Easy for you to say. You're the favorite. You ain't a father. Thor glowered down at his hands. They still had blood on them. You don't know what it's like. No, but I'm about to. That sobered Thor right up. The fuck you say? Well, apparently Valkyries can bear children after all. Who knew? I'm gonna be an uncle? That's the part you take away from this? Thor continued to stare at him. He sighed. Yes, you're gonna be an uncle. Hammett met Anvil. Once, twice, thrice now. Time and time again it crashed down to strike the metal beneath, battering smoldering steel into the desired shape, banging out a steady cadence with speed and skill that would have been any sane smith's wet dream. Or nightmare, given how quickly the dwarf before him was working. Come to think of it, any sane smith would have been head over heels to have an Aesir god in their shop, too. But these two were far from sane now, weren't they? Their work was famed across the 9 realms, their craft legendary, their wit unparalleled, despite their peculiarities. They had forged all manner of things throughout the years. Wonderful weapons and terrifying tools, amazing armor and splendorous shields, known by kings and gods alike. Had he a say, Odin would have happily locked them up and forced them to smith for Asgard all day. Which was precisely why he'd sought them out here, in their little home away from home. He had no need of bootlickers or lickspittles. These were neither. So you're that Aesir pup what been running around the realms with Tyr, eh? Said Smith set his latest project to cool in a battle of water and squinted his way, uncaring of the geyser of steam that followed. What you want with us? He didn't miss the hostility in that gaze. We already made that blasted bloody hammer for her idiot brother, and I ain't about to make another for some up-jumped runt who thinks he's gonna be the next king of Asgard. An open and gloved palm collided with his back, cutting him short. Brock. Bah. The blue dwarf shrugged off his brother's hand. Sawed off, Sindri. Ain't no point lying to this lot, might as well be honest. The last time you were honest, you got yourself kicked out of Alfheim. A mighty guffaw answered him. Ain't my fault the buggers didn't know what a juicy knockin' was. Setting that aside, Naruto Baldur coughed into a fist and thumped a fist against his tattooed chest before their story could fall into lurid territory. You must be Brock. He glanced toward the more squeamish of the duo with a small smile. And I take it you're Sindri. The latter smartened up and puffed out his chest. We certainly are. The Huldra brothers, at your service. Hopefully so. Naruto planted his feet, swept one hand down to his belt, tugged an item free, and lobbed it their way. A heavy sack of hacksilver landed on their workbench with a heavy thunk, causing the worn wooden frame to creak beneath its weight. Both brothers balked. He took the chance to get his foot in the door, as it were. I'd like you to make something for me. Well, me and my nephews. Thor's brats. Leave it to Brock to cut to the meat of the matter. They're a damn menace. He fought down a rueful smile. Magni and Modi are better these days. Better, he says. I do say so. Laughter escaped him at the last. I'm their uncle. Those brats damn well better be behaving after the thrashing he'd given them last time. They would have killed that veneer god if he hadn't stepped in. Magni had a good head on his shoulders. It was just a matter of steering him in the right direction. And if Modi was acting up again, he'd have words for him. Wish for peace, prepare for war, as Tyr said. But that was neither here nor there. Work to be done and all that. Brock sniffed. What's in it for us? Aha, curiosity. That was the way to their hearts. Besides money, fame, glory, a chance to correct your mistake. The Huldra brothers exchanged a terse look between one another. Naruto couldn't help but commiserate with them. Theirs was an old argument. He could see it in their eyes. It wasn't unknown to him. Thor was getting a little too swing-happy with that hammer of his these days. Mjolnir was a famous weapon to be sure, but unfortunately it was also a very powerful weapon. In the hands of the god of thunder. Well, the less said about that the better. He had his hands full trying to keep his big bugger of a brother from slaughtering every giant he could get his mitts on. Hence the reason he was here. Indeed, he could already see Sindri warming to the idea. You're not the first to suggest that, Lord Baldur. No? Interesting. He could broach that topic later. For now, he had a task to attend. Best be quick about it while Odin wasn't watching. If he asked after his trip to Svartalheim, he could claim he'd tasked Brock and Sindri with making new weapons for the young sons of Thor. A pliable excuse and something his so-called All-Father wouldn't be able to see through, should he come on-knocking. Kurama grunted his agreement. He won't see this coming. There isn't a single raven near here. Right. Ravens. Odin's little spies. And wasn't that just another can of worms? Really needed to find a way to free those poor souls. No, one step at a time. Weapons and armor first. Then he could go about doing a little soul severing of his own when dear old Dad wasn't looking. None of that lord stuff. He waved a hand quickly to silence his anger as much as the dwarves. Magni and Modi aside, I'd like you to make several things for me. First. He spent the better part of 5 minutes explaining what he was truly after, and then 5 more specifying what had to be used. By the end of it, Brock whistled. Sindri, however, wrung his gloved hands. That might take a while. How do we let you know when it's ready? Nothing simpler. Naruto tapped a hand to his belt and tossed a scroll their way. Open that when you need me. I have its twin right here. He held up another small roll of vellum. They're connected. Mine will pulse blue when you do. As to how I'll find you, well, I have my ways. Brock planted both hands on the table. We'll be needing the blood of a god for all of those things you mentioned, especially last one. Naruto made to bite his finger. Nah. The Azure Vulgarian waved him down. Gotta be fresh. Lady prefers it that way. Oh ho. Awfully demanding, this lady of yours. When do I get to meet her? Brock shook a fist at him. When she's good and ready, bucko. Alright, sore subject. I'll let it be. He'd expected as much. The Lady of the Forge could be eccentric. Not even Odin knew what she looked like. Yet another thing he talked his father out of. Honestly, it was like watching a child. Take your eyes off him for 1 second and he could get to all manner of trouble. If this was what Mimir had to deal with every day, he pitied him. Hopefully he could keep him occupied until he returned. Which he should. Soon. He set a hand to his hip. We're all set, then. Should be. Brock shrugged. Come back when it's done and you'll get money's worth. Sindri perked up suddenly. Speaking of which, might I have a moment of your time? A blonde brow rose. We're talking now, aren't we? Not here. Brock grunted his acceptance. Fine, fine, make me do all the work. Naruto let the germophobic dwarf lead him to an adjacent room, one a good distance from the forge. An ugly feeling rose in the pit of his stomach. More secrets. Yay. As if Baldur didn't have enough to juggle already. A cursory check confirmed there weren't any ravens hiding in here either, at least, living or dead. Good. He'd sense the little buggers if they were. Alright. He crossed both arms before his chest as said dwarf tugged the door shut behind them. What is it? Sindri didn't answer, not right away. He wrung his hands instead, took a deep breath, and... Is it true? A blonde brow arched. Is what true? You know, he gestured expansively, the stories. I'm afraid you'll have to be a bit more specific. There are an awful lot of myths about me. Kurama yawned in the back of his head. More than I care to remember. You've been busy. I was asking after the happier ones. Sindri flung up his arms with an exasperated cry. You know, where you, help people. Really? Naruto felt his brow furrow. Do you have any idea how little that narrows it down? I could tell you the time I shook hands with a many-armed giant, the day Freyr and I got ourselves soused and fell into the light of Alfheim, or the night Skadi and I. Wait. Sindri raised a finger. Skad? The Skadi? As in Lady of the Hunt? Pale skin, hair white as snow, and ice blue eyes? That Skadi? We've met. Kurama guffawed openly. Met, he says. As I recall, it was a fair bit more than that. Naruto coughed into a fist again, this time to hide his burning flush. The Lady of the Hunt had proven rather persistent for a frost giant. Almost frightfully so. He'd never met a woman more determined in his first life or his second. Nor more beautiful. Try as he might, he just didn't know how to deal with someone like that. Surely she wouldn't think to search for him here in Svartalheim. No, surely not. He'd be in and out again before she so much as got a whiff of him. Don't give me that. You're fond of her. Wouldn't be healed her old man if you weren't. Small wonder she's after your hand. Much to Odin's chagrin. Kurama laughed at him. Chagrin, was it? I believe he said the two of you would make beautiful children together. Only because Skadi turned him down, first. Freya had harsh words for him after that. Can we get back on topic, here? Sindri's voice plucked him from his musings. What I'm asking is, well, you can heal people, can't you? His face closed down. No, I can't. Yes, you can. Sindri remained unmovable as a stone. I've seen you do it before. Blue eyes flashed red. When? Sindri stepped back, balking beneath his now slitted gaze. Midgard. You helped a sick wolf. He rocked back on his heels. Gah. That was a closely guarded secret. How'd the little devil find out? Realm hopping, of course. How else? Blasted dwarves. I can. He admitted after a moment's pause. Provided I get to them within a timely manner. How timely? Nosy little dwarf. Very. Naruto frowned. Very. I can't bring back the dead. And just as well he couldn't. Odin wouldn't let him out of his sight if he could. Is there a point to this? My brother. Sindri stole a quick glance toward the closed door, as though he half expected Brock to come bursting through the damn thing at any given moment, then glanced back to him. He's been taking risks lately. Doing foolish things. Might have something to do with all the silver he's touching. It's already turned him blue, but the other day he almost... Sindri. Alright. I need a favor, your godliness. He was going to regret this, wasn't he? Still, nothing ventured, nothing gained. He waved him on. If anything happens to him, Sindri wrung his gloved hands together fretfully. If he gets hurt, promise me you'll help him. Do that and I'll make anything you want, whenever you want it. Free of charge. We might bicker, even fight at times, but he's my brother, and I can't bear the idea of living without him. I know that sounds cowardly, stupid even, but you have to understand. Stop. Naruto held up a hand to silence him. He didn't want to admit just how much the words had touched him. There's nothing wrong with worrying about family. I've got brothers of my own. He hardly squabbled with Tyr and Thor the way the Huldra brothers bickered, but he wouldn't want any harm to come to them, either. No need to explain that. Not to me. What about you? The dwarf's bearded mug twitched. What about me? If you get hurt in the future. It seemed an obvious question. Do you want me to heal you, too? No. Much to his alarm, Sindri shook his head. I don't matter. Brock does. If worst comes to worse, I'm sure he'll do fine without me. He wouldn't. He'd seen folks lose siblings before. A certain Uchiha came to mind. It was not an experience he cared to repeat. That is an alarming lack of self-worth. We'll need to work on that, going forward. I mean it. An edge crept into Sindri's voice as she stared him down. I don't know what lies ahead, but if you ever have to choose between saving him or me. No, Sindri recoiled. No, it means no. Naruto shook his head, stifling further protests. If you're acting for my help, then I won't choose between either of you. Our agreement will extend to the both of you, although I'll keep an extra close eye on Ol Brock all the same. There will be no arguments. He bit the last word out, running a hand through his messy hair. But tell your brother to be more careful going forward. Not just around the forge, but in general. Life is a precious thing. Don't go wasting it. All right, Sindri faltered, then rallied. I'll do that. So long as he understood. See that you do. Want a shake on it? Sindri eyed his bare hand, offered halfway now. Begging your pardon, but I'd rather not. I don't know where that thing's been, URK. Naruto reached the rest of the way to clasp his hand. The dwarf gave up and shook his palm, though not before muttering about needing new gloves. It's a promise, then. He managed a small, tremulous smile. You'll keep your word, won't you? A touch of Naruto's old Acer blood stirred in him. I never go back on my word, dwarf. Of that, I have little doubt. Oi! Brock's voice bounced off the door, muffled by distance. If you's two slack jaws are done jabbering in there, I need help over here. Sindri scarpered out the door. Naruto didn't miss the spring in his step. Coming. Naruto trailed the clamor of the dwarves wash over him. He found it oddly peaceful. To be so consumed by the desire to create something to protect someone that you lost sight of everything else in front of you, well, truly, he envied the dwarves their single-minded work. The hell were ya talking about anyway? Brock asked. Sindri intervened quickly. Bless his worrying heart. Just ingredients. Speakin' of which, project like this needs some quality scap slag. Might have to get our hands dirty. Sindri gagged. Oh gods, I'm gonna be sick. Naruto smiled as their banter carried Anta into the inane. He didn't miss their smiles. At the end of the day, you didn't choose your family. Family chose you. I'll leave you to be. See you soon. 0.0.0.0. Another day, another disaster averted. Naruto cracked his neck as he emerged from the realm gate. He barely paid mind to those he passed. More than a few Asgardians bowed his way. Others shouted his name and he waved half-heartedly to those in return. But his thoughts had already turned inward. His feet carried him forward on an unerring path home. He was glad to put Svartalheim behind him. Glad to have commissioned the Huldra brothers while he'd the chance. Glad to be one step closer toward his penultimate goal in securing peace for the realms. Now it was just a matter of waiting. Brock and Sindri hadn't said how long it would take, and the list of ingredients he'd given them were extensive. Could be days, weeks, months. He didn't think it would take a year, but then again, time was always funny up here in Asgard. Dwarves were nearly as ornery as the Acer themselves, come to think of it, but he enjoyed their bluntness. No subtle words or veiled threats to worry about, no pesky Heimdall to eye for fear of the bastard trying to stick a dagger in his back, just good, simple conversation. It had felt, well, wonderful to speak his mind for the first time in a while. Or perhaps that was just Sindri and Brock. He really didn't know any other people of such size to speak of. Uncle Baldur, belatedly, he realized where his feet had carried him. He'd made it back to the lodge all right, but in his haste to return home, he'd forgotten something. Or rather, someone. Woo-oh. He had all of an instant to plant his feet, open his arms, and brace himself for impact. Even then he nearly found himself bowled clean off his feet as a bright blur cannoned into his legs. He reeled backward as his back hit a wall, the impact of which drove a short, pained laugh from his lips. Aha! He looked down to the little bundle of joy in his arms. There's my favorite niece. A merry giggle answered him. I'm your only niece, silly. He tousled her bright hair. Why, so you are. Say what you would about children being rambunctious, but little Thrud was strong. Far stronger than any child her age should be. Only 7 years old and she already packed a punch. He supposed that was testament to her parentage. Damn girl was gonna be powerful when she grew up. Hopefully he'd be around to see it. You just missed Uncle Tyr. She raised her arm, and he glimpsed a silver, round discus of metal there, inscribed with foreign runes. He got me a shield. Sounded like something Tyr would do. Always on the move, that one. And where did he go? Her little face screwed up, trying to remember. He said something about Alf. Alf. Alfheim. That. She bobbed her head in agreement. He said the dark elves and the light were being icky again, and he wanted to put a stop to it. That sounded just like him. The ghost of a grin dimpled his face. I very much doubt he used the word icky. Little Thrud huffed. I can't understand being words, okay. Sides, it's not important. He always gets me the best toys. That's what matters. Only because he traveled to all the best places. Well, if he's your favorite, then I guess you won't be needing the gift I got you. Her eyes widened. Gift. Yup. Naruto mussed the wild mane of her hair one last time and plucked another pouch from his belt. Fresh sweets from Svartalheim, but if you don't want them. I do. She hopped in place, little arms reaching, grabbing, fall just short. I want. Best uncle ever. Please, please, please. He held it just out of reach. Better than tear. Way better. Thata girl. He let the bag drop. It fell right into her hands. Said sweets were massacred in short order. Speaking of which, it's awfully quiet in here. Where's your mother? Mommy and Daddy had another fight. Thrud said between bites. She's sleeping. Ouch. And your brothers? Midgard. She chirruped happily. They're looking for someone with Grandma Freya. Trying to prove themselves to Daddy again, were they? There wasn't anything worth finding down in Midgard. Dot was there. Well, isn't that nice? Any idea who that might be? Her little head bobbed. The Norns. His smile soured. I see. Irksome witches. On that, they were in agreement. He and Kurama had some tangential knowledge of the trio. Enough to know that they didn't care a fig for what they said or thought. Sadly, the same couldn't be said of their mother in this lifetime. Freya wasn't quite so obsessed with the notion of prophecy as Odin, but she was concerned with him. He couldn't count the number of times she tried to keep him from harm in the past. All because these so-called Norns had said that Baldur would die a needless death. Pa. What did they know? That could mean any number of things. For instance, from a certain point of view, Baldur was already dead. He might have adopted the namesake, but he still clung to his previous identity. From the moment Odin had called his soul into this new, stronger body, the real Baldur may as well have ceased to exist. There was no destiny. No grand design. No script. Only the choices he made. He had chosen to accept Odin's offer. He chose to grow up here. He decided to use his influence to make things better, not just for Asgard, but all of the 9 realms. And if he was to die someday, Hel would have only him and Kurama. When she earned them. Not before, not after. He died more times than he could count in his first life. He didn't fear death. If by some foul miracle they did die well. The solution was simple. They'd claw their way out the underworld, bonk Hel over the head and come right back to Asgard, whether she liked it or not. He did, however, dislike the idea of the Norns twisting his mother's paranoia into ugly knots. Time and time again she to visit them. Time and again their prophecy remained unchanged. Made him want to go down there and knock some sense into them, it did. See if they saw that coming. Which begged the question, why on earth were Magni and Modi accompanying her this time? Did Odin fear she would run off if he left her alone? Possibly. Or did they simply want to know their own fates and were using her as an excuse? Bloody boys were obsessed with inheriting Thor's hammer. He'd have to ask old man Mimir the next time he saw him. Thrud's tiny hand tugged at his tattooed arm, drawing him out of his bleak reverie. Uncle? Enough about your brothers and the Norns. He patted her cheek. They're pricks. His brother's daughter blinked up at him, guileless as ever. What's a prick? A hand settled upon his back. Yes, Baldur, a familiar voice crooned just behind his ear with silken menace. What indeed? He looked over his shoulder and stared into eyes colder than Fimbulwinter itself. Oh, Seif. Didn't know you were up from your nap. I am. Her voice radiated saccharine sweetness. And I'll thank you to watch your mouth around my daughter, Baldur. Was just an accident, ya know. He brushed her off and stood. No need for the knives to come out. My husband said something similar. Naruto's smile thinned. Heard the two of you had another fight. Did you, now? Her gaze sought Thrud, only for her daughter to look elsewhere. That's not your concern. Of course it's my concern. We're family, aren't we? Seif planted a fist on her hip and glared his way. Thor was a right lucky bastard to have a wife like her. Sure, she could be a little scary at times, but at the end of the day she was a good woman and doing her damnedest to be a better mom. If not necessarily for her sons, then for Thrud's sake and those to come. Having a daughter had done much to mellow her out over the years. Better to see her like this than carrying another bun in the oven. A pregnant Seif was a scary Seif. Almost made him wonder what a pregnant Valkyrie would be like. Dot and dread the day he became a parent himself. Baldur. You're spacing out again. Am I? He looked back to her, absently patting Thrud's head. Sorry. Speaking of sorry, you might want to have a word with Heimdall. Some of the ice thawed from her eyes. He was looking for you. Looking for trouble more like. Where is he? With the All-Father. Her tone said it all. As did her slight smile. I heard you knocked him into Asgard's wall. I may have. Thrud cooed. That was you. It was so loud. Was it? He hadn't really paid attention at the time. Humiliating Heimdall had become something of a weekly exercise for him, if not daily. So much so that he hardly ranked their encounters. Why focus on that vicious little prick when his time could be better spent elsewhere with GNA and the Valkyries? Come to think of it, he'd promised tonight to risk and missed. You've got that look in your eye again. Sif batted his arm. Stop that. You're setting an absolutely horrid example for your niece. Tell you what, he winked her way. Thrudi can do the same when I've got rugrats of my own running around. Thrud perked up. I can? Wait, does that mean I'll have cousins? Sif paused. What are you implying? You're our resident diplomat. Naruto slipped between them with a merry hum, not trusting himself to hold his tongue. Best not to give the surprise away. Be diplomatic and figure it out. She shouted at his retreating back. That's not what that word means and you know it. La la la. Can't hear you, his piece said. The reborn Acer sauntered away before Sif could speak further. His smile didn't last long in her absence. He'd had his fun now, no point in putting this off any longer. Odin's chambers weren't far from the lodge. Rather, they were just underneath it. Right around the corner really. A hop, skip and a jump and he was there. He almost wished they weren't. If only for more time to gather his thoughts. Well, no time like the present. He approached the door at a brisk pace. A faint noise reached his ears from within, rising through the worn wood. Well. 2 guesses as to who's already in there. First 2 don't count. His stride slowed. Paused entirely now, as he heard words muffled through the wood. With but a thought and a wave of the hand, he concealed his presence. From there, here set one ear to the door and listen. He broke my nose. That was undoubtedly Heimdall in there, stirring up trouble again. Didn't he have anything better to do? Odin's voice radiated amusement. You're alive, aren't you? Walk if off already. Heimdall raged. Allfather. He means to do the same to you, or worse. And yet he's made no moves against me. Odin's retort was crisp, measured even. This isn't the first time you've accused him of such, Heim. The pause that followed was ominous indeed. One might think you're lying to me. Have you lost your touch? Oh, of course not. Good. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings now, would we? You favor him. Heimdall's voice rang with accusation. Why? He drinks and eats and whores himself out to any woman that's willing. Why keep such a creature close to you? Why? A patient albeit parental sigh answered him. You want to know why? Fine. I'll humor you. Because I'm the one that brought him here. Because he's my son. Because he's my successor. The people love him, and his reputation is my reputation. Do you have any idea of the power he possesses? Heimdall scoffed. He charms others with his silver tongue and his strength. What more is there to understand? Naruto nearly laughed. No, that lone word silenced him through the door. He's a talker like me, sure, but unlike me, he could squash you like a gnat, and you wouldn't be able to do a thing about it. Ha! He could match Surtur himself. Yet for all that, he's on my side. Our side. Even his children, my grandchildren, will be the stuff of legends. Powerful beyond measure. Just think. Years from now. Imagine how well prepared we might be with more of him running around come Ragnarok. As far as I'm concerned, he can bed whomever he pleases. Any child of his will strengthen our ranks. Unless your constant antagonizing will ruin that. I won't have it, you understand? Naruto bit his tongue until it bled. And what have you done for me recently, Heimdall? You haven't been the one amassing knowledge for me, making allies for us. He has. Thanks to him, the secrets of Jotunheim are nearly in my grasp. And you've been here. In Asgard. Putting your recent, incursion to Vanaheim last month aside, which, need I remind you, ended with Freyr sending you home with your tail tucked between your legs. Well, you've been less than useful as of late. I have served you faithfully in all things, All-Father. Such slavish devotion. It made him sick. I beg of you, do not doubt me. I don't doubt you, Heim. Maybe if you spent less time trying to find threats where there are none and more time bettering yourself, we wouldn't be having this conversation. A strangled snarl answered. For the love of. Listen to me, sure enough, Odin adopted a conciliatory tone. I can see you're worked up about this. But if Baldur wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Like everyone else who's ever gotten in his way. He could just imagine him waving a hand at him, not looking up from his desk. Now get out of here. I have work to do, and I'm sure Baldur's tired of eavesdropping. Dismissed. What? I didn't hear him, that was his cue. Naruto placed both hands against the door and flung it open. He took dark relish in the brief flicker of surprise that flitted across Heimdall's face. You heard him. Dismissed. Baldur. Heimdall's wild violet eyes glared hatefully into his serene blue orbs. Ah, if looks could kill. Well, he'd be a smoldering pile of ashes on the floor and they'd not be having this conversation now, wouldn't they? But his glare, however furious, could not, and they both knew it. Odin made a shooing motion. Go on, now. Get. I need to talk to my boy. Alone. Heimdall barged past, trying to smash him aside with one shoulder. Naruto made way, grinned when the sullen Acer tried to hit him anyway, and tripped him before he could react. The bearer of Yalarhan faceplanted into the wall with an awful crunch, further mangling his nose. A none too gentle shove sent him stumbling out the doors on all fours, which summarily closed on his sprawled form. There. Now what did you? Odin held up a finger. Waited until the angry Acer seemingly departed. Another moment more. Sighed, now. I know you're still there, Heimdall. Silence reigned. Naruto chuckled into it. Want me to shave you bald again? An angry snarl echoed behind the door, punctuated by a slam. Footsteps stalked away. This time there could be no denying his departure. Only then did a crooked grin tug at the corner of Odin's mouth. You're a vicious little shit when you want to be, you know that? Naruto planted both hands in his pockets. I learned from the best. Ha. The All-Father clapped him on the back. So you did. How was your trip? He couldn't be sure if it was a trap or not, maybe a test. Best to run with the story he'd crafted and hope for the best. Better, now that their world mill's finally up and running. He ran with his given excuse. Svartalheim will prosper thanks to that. Odin pulled a face. Will it, now? Dad, no, he drew him back before he could reach for one of his ravens. You promised to let me handle this. Marching an army down there will only make you more enemies. We have enough of those. Give it time. Let them see you for who you really are. Monster. Coward. Killer. But he didn't need to know that. Odin planted a hand on his desk and looked away. Time's in short supply these days, Baldur. He lifted his chin to stare him down. Then we'll make more. Odin's good eye met his, neither moved. Not for the first time, Naruto wanted to give the All-Father a good hard shake. In many ways Odin could be like a child at times. His first instinct was to destroy anything or anyone who dared oppose him. Often, but not always. Other times he could be clever. Subtle. Insidious. It often fell to him and Mimir to protect the man from himself. And if they couldn't, well, sometimes you had to put old dogs down. Time would tell if it came to that. And besides, he'd heard every bit of his conversation with Heimdall. Make weapons of my future children, will you? I don't think so. When if Ragnarok came about, any heirs of his would fight because they chose to, not because they'd been gaslit into it by their mad grandfather. You're right, you're right. Beneath his glare, the elder god yielded with a sigh he didn't entirely trust. I just worry sometimes. Come here, he beckoned him to the desk. I want to show you something. A blonde brow rose. And what might that be? What, would you rather spend the rest of the day pummeling Heimdall? His brow crept higher still. Odin laughed. All right, stupid question. Here, have a look at this, will you? He circled over to the man's desk and found himself looking at a mask. An old, broken, wooden thing, carved with runes he couldn't comprehend. Odin waved a hand at it. He picked it up. No response. Though it hummed under his touch, the runes did not glow. The mask remained inert. It was not meant for him. You're aware of Ragnarok. HMHMM. He tilted the mask end over end, trying to get a better look at it. It starts after Fimbulwinter, which begins when I die. Kurama bridled. You won't die. I'll not let it happen. Don't worry. I'm in no hurry to kick the bucket. Odin tutted, blissfully unaware of their inner dialogue. Awfully blasé to talk about your own death, even for you. Mom's busy with the Norns. She won't mind. Your secret is safe with me. Not even a hint of surprise on the Ravenpecker's face. Odin knew where she was, then, which implied he'd been the one to send Magni and Modi with her. Even gods don't live forever, boy. True. He set the wooden mask down with a sigh. Reckon I've got a few hundred years until I'm anywhere near old enough to kick the bucket. Prat. Odin nudged him with an elbow. That mask there is the key to preventing all this, to averting Ragnarok. With it, we can finally look into the abyss. Have our answers. You're talking about that crack in the world, down in your cellar. I am. The All-Father slung an arm around his shoulders. It's not a sin to crave knowledge, son. We all want to know our place in the world. There's nothing wrong with that. Mortals find meaning in praying to us, and perhaps there is, at the end of the day. But you and I, where do gods or demigods go when we die? What does it all mean? That's the answer I seek. Answers he likely wouldn't find, but that was his battle to lose. You say that now, his brow furrowed. but I've seen what too much of one thing does to a man. That's what I've got you for. Odi tousled his hair as he hadn't done in years. To keep me on the straight and narrow. You're my best tracker, after all. One that hadn't done his bidding for ages, but how was he to know that? He could do it. Right here. Right now. They were alone. Just shove his fist through Odin's chest and squeeze. Any threat he ever was and would be. Killing him was certainly an option, but he wanted to help him. The All-Father could be so much better, if his paranoia and thirst for knowledge didn't outweigh his wisdom. Maybe once he had his answers he'd finally man up and start acting the father and grandfather he was meant to be. And if he didn't, well, he'd burn that bridge when they came to it. Alright, he shook his arm off. So long as your quest doesn't consume you, I'm in. Good, good, your brother was asking after you, by the way. Naruto found himself perking up despite his best efforts. You mean Tyr? Odin made a face. Not that preachy stiff. Honestly, he's useless. He can stay in Alfheim for all I care. There it was again. The casual disparagement. Unbidden, he recalled Sif's words. Thor, then. Is he drinking again? Define drinking. A distant crash rattled the whole of Asgard. So that's a yes. Alright. You want me to drag him out of his cups? Odin clapped his shoulder. If you wouldn't mind. I need him somewhat sober today. Sober for what? Don't you worry about that. Just snap him out of it. He did. He worried very much. Fine. But I want Ingrid in exchange. The All-Father quirked a graying brow. Don't you already have a weapon? I thought you liked Skafnung.